We have 2 children, a 27-year-old son and a 30-year-old daughter, and 4 grandchildren. We have been married for 32 years. I want to keep this as short as possible, but I am so scared of what is going to happen to our lives now that this secret has come out. My son came and saw me a week ago. My husband was at work. We sat down, and I knew something was wrong, and I was concerned for him. I told him to just tell me what the problem was, and we would sort through whatever it was. He said he didn't know how to start, so he would just put it all on the table and see what I had to say. I was getting very concerned at this stage, never thinking that what he would tell me could destroy our lives. My son told me that he took an ancestry DNA test because, like his dad, he was interested in genealogy and he wanted his kids to know where they came from and the history. I still hadn't clicked at that stage. I thought that it came back with a medical issue that may be present and expressed my thoughts. "No, Mom," he said, "that isn't the problem. The problem is that Dad has no common DNA." I started shaking and went into shock. He asked if his dad knows. I told him no, I didn't know until now. The secret I had kept for 28 years is no longer a secret. I knew that my son could have been the product of a mistake I had made early on in my marriage. But when he was born, he looked so much like my husband and me that I dismissed it and convinced myself he was his. The mistake, or bad choice, was when we were going through a tough time with my husband working long hours and we were struggling to get a deposit for a house. We were also trying for a second child. One of my husband's friends was in our lives as he was going through a breakup, and we were trying to be supportive. My husband was at work, and his friend and I were drinking and just talking about life. We got drunk, and yes, we had intimacy. I can't even remember it, and the next morning his friend and I were mortified and vowed never to bring it up again. It was such a long time ago, I cannot even really remember it. I dismissed it as a one-time mistake and have never been tempted to cheat again. Well, I fell pregnant, and here we are. My husband is such a loving man, and our marriage has always been strong. My son wants me to tell him, as he will find out soon enough through ancestry. How do I proceed? I am disgusted that this is going to destroy my husband, my entire family. I know I was a terrible person back then for what I did. I cannot erase that, but the hurt we are all going to go through I cannot fathom. My husband has not found out yet, but I have to tell him before he finds out. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I need you to understand, you weren't just unfaithful to him once. Every day that you woke up and decided not to tell him, you lied to him again. When you confess, understand you are not just confessing to cheating once 28 years ago, you are confessing to lying to him for 28 years. Short of violence, any reaction he has is justified. Comment 2. My husband has not found out yet, but I have to tell him before he finds out. I agree. This is going to be hard for him, not just because of what you did, but because his son is not related to him, and that is going to come as a shock. Now, for the update. A few days after the DNA test drama, I knew I had to tell my husband the truth about our son. The longer I waited, the more I felt like a ticking time bomb, just waiting to go off. So I picked a quiet evening after dinner to spill the beans. I thought that would be simple. Just the two of us on the couch, a glass of wine, and then bam, here's the truth. Not so easy, huh? We sat on the living room couch, and honestly, it felt like I was about to go into surgery without anesthesia. My heart was racing, and I was probably more white-knuckled than the time my son borrowed my car without asking. I started off with the whole DNA test thing, talking about how it brought up some family history. My husband laughed it off. I mean, who wouldn't? He thought I was diving into one of those quirky family stories, like how his great aunt had a pet alligator. But I had to get serious, so I took a deep breath, probably the most dramatic one I've ever taken, and told him the truth about our son's paternity. I mean, the truth was coming out whether I liked it or not. His laughter faded, and he looked at me like I had just told him I was running for president of the moon. Total confusion and disbelief. He thought there was some mistake, and honestly, so did I, but here we were. I grabbed the DNA test results, and it's like time stood still. His expression changed from confusion to, well, you could probably guess, anger. He was angry. In a matter of seconds, we were off to the races with a full-blown argument. Voices raised, accusations flying everywhere. He wanted to know why I never told him before. I mean, what was I supposed to say? Hey, honey, let's discuss my drunken fling from 28 years ago. I explained the whole situation from 28 years ago, how things were rocky between us, and how I made one stupid mistake. I thought he'd understand that we'd gotten through that rough patch and built a life and family together. The next day, I called our son because I knew I had to discuss the whole mess with him. We agreed to meet at our favorite diner because honestly, where else do you go when you want to talk? At the diner, our son was shocked but surprisingly understanding. He's always been the mature one, which is saying something considering he's my kid. We came up with a plan to confront my husband together, and I felt a little less alone in this mess. I thought about how to tell my husband, and I decided to host a family dinner. Because nothing says, let's talk about a family secret, like a home-cooked meal, right? I invited my husband, our son, and his wife for what I hoped would be a normal evening. But during dinner, the mood was like that awkward silence when you forget to invite someone to a party. Halfway through, my husband got a call from a mutual friend, and I thought it was a lucky break, until the friend mentioned the situation. Yeah, he spilled the beans to the entire table. The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop, or in our case, you could hear my husband's glare directed at me. I tried to explain, but we were right back to square one with the accusations. Our son stood up and said he wanted the truth out in the open. And just like that, the family dinner turned into a family confrontation. Everyone was airing their grievances like it was laundry day. Things escalated quickly, and my husband threw a plate in frustration. I mean, who does that? It shattered on the floor like our family dynamic. His daughter-in-law stepped in, trying to be the peacekeeper, and reminded everyone that we needed to calm down for the sake of family. My husband stormed out, this time heading to his sister's house. After he left, our son and I decided to go after him, because what else were we supposed to do? Find a corner and cry? We found him at his sister's house, pacing angrily in the living room. His sister tried to mediate, and we had that uncomfortable conversation about how we needed to communicate openly. My husband requested some space from the family for a few weeks to process everything. I didn't like it, but I respected his request. His sister suggested a family meeting for the following weekend to discuss everything. The family meeting took place with everyone present, including his sister. We talked about the impact of the secret on our family dynamics. My husband listened, but it felt like he was on autopilot, not fully engaging or looking at anyone. Our son spoke up, suggesting that we focus on building trust moving forward. My husband finally broke down and admitted he felt lost and betrayed. Honestly, it was like watching a dam break. He requested a break from the family for a few weeks to process everything again. I respected his request, even though it was hard. In the following weeks, I focused on strengthening my relationship with our son. We bonded over shared activities, rediscovering our connection. Eventually, my husband reached out, asking to meet and talk things over. We set a date to discuss our future and the family dynamics moving forward. To answer a few questions, the DNA test was done because our son was curious about his ancestry and health risks. Nothing suspicious. The child from my past mistake is not in our lives at all. My husband has never met him, and I never even considered contacting him. This whole situation has been extremely difficult for everyone. Our son and his wife are fine, and his sister is being supportive, but my marriage is on shaky ground. My husband and I are trying to rebuild trust, but it will take time. I hope we can eventually heal and move forward together. Am I the idiot for refusing to clean up after my husband who acts like a child and leaves our home in a filthy state? I'm sure you all have heard similar stories. My husband, despite multiple discussions over the past 2 years, never takes the initiative in chores or anything in our lives. I'm constantly the one reminding him and asking him to do things, and when I don't, it doesn't get done. He told me he started hating me because of it about 6 months ago. So we both had an agreement that I would stop telling him what to do as long as he starts following up with his promises. I followed up on my end of the promise, and he didn't within a few days. We agreed that since I wake up first to work out and then make breakfast, he wakes up with our child and takes her to daycare before work. After work, I pick up our child, make dinner, and manage the bedtime routine while he cleans the kitchen. Every single day, I walk out after bedtime to find the kitchen not being touched. It's so disappointing and hurtful. Usually I get upset at him and tell him that I really want the kitchen cleaned every day, and he just brushes me off, saying he will do it in the morning. 25% of the time he does. But since we had the agreement, I stopped. I just pretended to ignore the mess and would get ready for bed because by then I would have to get up in 7 hours. I let him be responsible for the mess because that's what we agreed on. 2 months later, and our kitchen was always a mess. Constantly, we would have molded food on the stove, next to the sink, and crumbs everywhere on the floor. So I gave up and started cleaning whenever I had time. I learned to cook and clean at the same time. Stressful with a child, but I learned most of the time there were a week's worth of dishes, and we have no dishwasher, so it took me a long time to catch up on washing the dishes. After bedtime, usually, I'd be the only one cleaning. He would be lying in bed, even though I wake up 2 hours before he does. He would literally yell at me about how I let the dishes get so stinky whenever he did wash the dishes, even though he agreed that he was responsible for cleaning after dinner. So I stopped relying on him and just started taking care of everything on my own. It's been 2 months of that mindset, and I find it harder to respect him now. He seems like a child to me, always complaining about everything and never putting in effort, always too tired and grumpy. Today I was very excited because my husband brought up the idea of a movie night date. He never brings up date ideas or plans them, so it made me so hopeful. He said he would rent a movie, and after bedtime we would watch it. I made a fancier dinner and put our child down. She took a little longer to settle, but I was fine with it because I figured he would clean today so we could have a movie night. I was wrong. He didn't even bother to close the lids on the pans on the stove. He just turned off the lights in the kitchen. It felt like my heart broke, and I cleaned the kitchen myself again. He walked out, didn't say a word, and watched YouTube videos at the counter. Once I was done cleaning, we went to the bedroom, and he just laid down and went to sleep. It hurt so much. I was so hopeful this time. He gets mad at me that I don't treat him like a man, but he never shows me he's reliable. I'm always hurt by his actions. Anyway, any advice on what I should do? Now for a few comments before the update. He gets mad at me that I don't treat him like a man, but he never shows me he's reliable. Well, it does come back to this, doesn't it? He wants to be treated like a man, but is he giving you any reason to do so? Aren't you being forced to be the adult, the parent in this relationship? Don't you have to manage him like you're his mother, and he is a lazy teenager unwilling to contribute to the house? You need an adult partner contributing to the house equally. You need support, someone you can rely on. He told me he started hating me because of it, but this is pathetic. This is him failing and resenting you for it. He takes his own sheepishness out on you, and that isn't fair in the slightest. It's only going to get worse. He doesn't respect you or value your feelings. I just split over something similar. I would literally cry and beg for help, but my soon-to-be ex-spouse would tell me this was how he was and he's always been messy, etc. I finally stopped asking for help and he thought everything was fine. A year ago, I finally told him I was done and couldn't do it anymore. Cue the surprised Pikachu face and the, if it was that bad I would have changed. Sure, I begged for years and you told me no, and now you're upset? No. Take your things and go. Now for the update. It's been 3 weeks since I last posted about the kitchen situation and my husband's lack of help. After the last incident, I decided to have a serious talk with him about our chores. We sat down at the dining table one evening after our kid went to bed. I was hoping for more than just words, you know? He nodded but didn't say much, just shrugged and said he'd try harder. I mean, what does that even mean? That weekend, my parents invited us over for dinner to celebrate my mom's birthday. My husband said he'd take care of the dishes after we ate, which gave me some hope. We enjoyed the dinner, and I thought he might finally step up when we got home. When we returned, I found the kitchen still messy with leftover takeout containers. I confronted him about it, and he claimed he was tired from the party. I went to bed frustrated, and he stayed up playing video games. Classic, right? The next week, I went to a family reunion at my uncle's house, hoping to clear my head. My sister asked me how things were going with my husband, and I gave her a brief rundown. She suggested that I have a heart-to-heart with him again, but I wasn't sure that would help. I got home and my husband was in the same spot, gaming away as usual. I decided to take a different approach and started leaving little notes around the house. The notes asked him to help out with specific chores, like taking out the trash or vacuuming. He ignored the notes, so I started putting them in his gaming area. He eventually noticed and laughed it off, saying he'd get to it later. One night, I came home from work to find him watching TV while the kitchen was still messy. He got defensive, saying I was being unreasonable and that I was always nagging him. I started volunteering at a local community center, keeping busy with new projects. I met some awesome people who inspired me to focus on what I could control. I planned a family game night, hoping to reconnect with him and our kid. The night arrived, and I set everything up with snacks and games. When he came home, he seemed uninterested and went straight to his phone. After the games, I confronted him again about his lack of interest and effort. He told me I was overreacting, and I was done trying to convince him otherwise. I decided it was time to show him the consequences of his actions. I arranged a weekend getaway for myself, planning to visit my sister's place. I packed a bag and told him I needed some time away to think. He seemed confused but didn't ask questions, thinking I'd be back soon. When I returned, I found him surrounded by takeout containers and empty soda cans. I calmly told him that I was no longer going to clean up after him. He looked shocked. Edit: I planned this getaway to make him realize the mess he creates, not as a punishment. I returned home to find him in a shocking state, which confirmed my feelings about our situation. He seemed overwhelmed and asked for help, which made him acknowledge his role in our relationship. He's willing to change now. Am I the idiot for blaming my husband for our son's accident and contemplating divorce because he talks to his sister more than me? I've been holding this in for so long and I just need to get it out. I feel like my marriage is crumbling and I don't know what to do. 2 years ago, my husband, who is 35 years old, and I, who am 29 years old, were going through a rough patch. He suggested we spend some time alone and have intimacy like we used to early in our relationship. We have a son, and at the time he was 5 years old. I never let him go out alone without supervision, even though we live in a nice neighborhood. But that day, my husband insisted. He told me to let our son go play with his friends outside for a while so we could have the house to ourselves. He said he needed this, needed us to be okay again. He was going through so much stress from work, and he was angry a lot during that time, and I didn't want to upset him more. I can't explain how much I regret that decision. While our son was outside, he got hit by a car. He survived, but the accident left him with a lifelong disability. He's in a wheelchair now. The guilt I feel is overwhelming. I keep thinking that if I had stood my ground and not let him go out, things would have been different. Since then, I've had a hard time being intimate with my husband. Every time we try to have intimacy, my mind goes back to that day. I keep feeling like something bad will happen again if I let myself relax and just be in the moment. I can't get past the fear, and I end up stopping halfway through. My husband gets frustrated, and I don't blame him. It's been 2 years now, and I know he's angry that I can't move on. He thinks I'm punishing him for what happened, even though I've never blamed him. I've never said it was his fault. It was an accident, but I feel like he can't handle the guilt. He doesn't bring it up directly, but whenever we argue, he'll accuse me of taking it out on him or shutting him out because of the accident. I feel like he wants to leave me, but he won't say it out loud. I feel like a burden to him now. I've even thought about asking for a divorce myself just to make it easier for him, but I can't bring myself to do it. I've been a stay-at-home mom since the accident, and I've used up all my savings. Plus, I'm not from this country originally, and the thought of being on my own with nowhere to go without my son is terrifying. For the past few months, I've just been agreeing with everything he says during arguments because I don't want him to bring up the accident or use it against me. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells all the time, and I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. I'm stuck between wanting to make him happy and feeling completely unloved. How do I move forward when the guilt and fear won't go away? Should I be the one to ask for a divorce even though I'm scared? To add, I didn't even have time to know if his friends were outside or not. When the accident happened, it turned out he was alone on his way back home. It wasn't a situation where there were other parents or supervision. I wish I had looked into it more, but it all happened so fast and I didn't really check. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I wouldn't or couldn't get over blaming my husband and myself for this. There are so many other ways he could have come up with for you two to have alone time that didn't include leaving your 5-year-old unsupervised outside. If your husband doesn't blame himself, then he should. He absolutely should. And now at this point, all he cares about is somehow thinking that having intimacy is going to fix all of your problems. I get the feeling he was that way before your son's accident as well. There's also a reason why so many marriages crumble when a child is disabled. And yours isn't a strong and healthy marriage. Honestly, I would leave at this point and get therapy for myself. There is no question you have trauma and possibly post-traumatic stress disorder. I am so sorry this has happened to you. Comment 2. I think you might have developed a form of post-traumatic stress disorder. Also, just bending backwards to keep the peace at home with your husband doesn't make the situation better. It sounds as if you are being isolated in your own painful world, and it's not getting any better. You need professional help, your husband too, but I am concerned about your emotional well-being. Do you think you can bring yourself to file for divorce, alimony, and look for a job? Is it possible for you to move to your country of origin to have a stronger support network? Now, for the update. A few days after my last update, I went to a family birthday party for my husband's niece. I had no choice, really. My husband insisted we go. The atmosphere was as expected, tense. I tried to stay strong for my son's sake. He has been through so much already. I did not want to add to his pain. At the party, I overheard my husband speaking quietly with his sister outside on the porch. I caught bits of their conversation about needing to talk and things can't go on like this. My heart sank. I was so curious, so I discreetly moved closer to listen. But of course, the door closed before I could hear more. Moments later, my husband rejoined the party, acting like nothing was wrong. That night, we had a heated discussion in our living room with the lights dimmed. He insisted that we were in a rough patch and suggested we see a couples counselor. I know, we agreed to give counseling a try, hoping it would help. A week later, we went to our first counseling session. The counselor pointed out how unresolved feelings from the accident were impacting our relationship. My husband admitted feeling pushed away and not knowing how to connect with me since the incident. That hit hard. A few days later, I got a text from my husband's sister inviting me to dinner. I arrived at their house to find my husband already there, deep in conversation with his sister. I noticed they were discussing topics I hadn't been told about, raising my suspicions even more. After dinner, I overheard my husband's sister express concern about the state of our marriage. Later that week, my husband and I had another counseling session where we discussed the dinner. He revealed his sister's concern, but I felt it was more than that. I started questioning whether he was confiding in her about our problems. That weekend, the family planned a holiday trip to the beach, which was supposed to be a bonding experience. The trip started off well, but tensions arose when my son had a meltdown over a sandcastle. My husband snapped at our son, causing me to step in and defend him. This led to an argument between us, drawing the attention of his family members. My husband stormed off to the car, leaving me feeling exposed in front of his family. I decided to take our son for ice cream to calm things down. While waiting in line, my phone buzzed with a message from my husband's sister. I read that my husband had opened up about our marriage during a private moment, expressing his frustrations. The trip ended with us not speaking on the drive home, both feeling the weight of the unresolved issues. Back home, we resumed counseling, trying to work through the family dynamics that had come up. My husband became increasingly distant, often retreating to his phone after sessions. The counselor suggested taking a break from family activities to focus on our marriage. We agreed, but things remained tense. As we approached the next session, the atmosphere at home grew colder, and the stakes felt higher. Mini update. During our next counseling session, the atmosphere was tense. My husband appeared distant, and I felt a knot in my stomach. The counselor asked about our progress, and my husband mentioned feeling frustrated with the pace of our sessions. I was taken aback. He then admitted feeling more comfortable discussing our issues with his sister than with me. I was crushed. After the session, we had a difficult conversation about the importance of trust and communication, realizing we had a long way to go. If you liked this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.